You're listening to Journey for Truth with internationally known medium, Tai Yi practitioner, and radio host Tammy Urbanic.
Hello and welcome to Journey for Truth on iHeartRadio and YouTube. I'm Tammy Urbanic. Thank you so much for joining me. Take a moment, go to my website, empowermentthroughhealing.org, and you can sign up for my free newsletter. There'll be lots of different information in that newsletter. Also, if you have another moment, go to jonalifeinstitute.com and you can sign up for that free newsletter, which is packed full of really, really great information. My guest this week is Kathryn Leigh Scott. Kathryn is an actress. She's an author. Some of Kathryn's works are House of the Dark Shadows, The Goldbergs, and many, many more wonderful works. She's also cared for her husband, who had an incurable ailment, and wrote about it in her memoir, Last Dance at the Savoy. We're going to be talking with Kathryn today about her journey with her husband and his illness. Kathryn, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tammy. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you on my show. Now let's talk about your husband's illness. What exactly did he have?
My husband was diagnosed in 2007 with a disease that is a degenerative neurological disease called Progressive Supranuclear Palsy. It's one of 5 what they call prime-of-life diseases, and they include corticobasal degeneration, Progressive Supranuclear Palsy, multiple systems atrophy, Lewy body with dementia, which is the one that Robin Williams was diagnosed with, and also ALS, which everybody knows as Lou Gehrig's disease. But so few people have ever even heard of Progressive Supranuclear Palsy.
Yeah, it's certainly something that I have not heard of. Now, what were the effects that he had in his body?
Well, among the hallmarks of the disease are several symptoms that shared by some of these other neurological diseases. For one thing, he kept falling, and he would fall backward. There's also an inability to shift the gaze up and down, which meant that I always wondered why he would tap a surface before putting something down. And it didn't occur to me until he was diagnosed that the reason is that he couldn't see it. And he also had a tendency to walk with his head down. And I kept saying, well, look up. That's why you're tripping. There are so many of these things that you just look upon as idiosyncratic behavior or little eccentricities. And then it's not until the diagnosis that they all sort of add up.
And what did it eventually lead to in terms of his illness? I mean, did he get to a point where he could no longer function, no longer speak? Was it to that degree of development?
Yes. Lou Gehrig's disease, for example, which strikes about 20,000 Americans, it's about the same number that Progressive Supranuclear Palsy has. And it's very similar to ALS in that one loses the ability to speak. There's just a complete physical breakdown. Jeff, who was an editor and a writer, he had been the founding editor of Los Angeles Magazine, the first city magazine in the country. And his whole career had been writing and communicating. And he was unable to grasp a pencil. He couldn't turn the pages of a magazine. He was not able to use 2 hands, in coordination. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of neurological symptoms that all of these neurological diseases have in common.
How long did it take for him to get diagnosed?
That's interesting. Very often, people are not diagnosed for years. Jeff was actually diagnosed within about 7 or 8 months. Originally, of course, Parkinson's he was thought to have Parkinson's, and then they thought it might be CBD, corticobasal degeneration. But the final diagnosis came when Jeff was sent to an ophthalmologist, who noticed, of course, that Jeff's inability to shift the gaze what indicated that he had PSP. But about 8 months, but there are people that have gone for years. As a matter of fact, I think there are probably people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, right, who in fact have one of these other neurological diseases.
Now, my understanding is that there is not a cure. So is this being widely researched to find a cure?
And there's a foundation called Cure PSP, and I'm now a volunteer spokesman for the foundation. They are doing amazing work. As a matter of fact, a portion of the proceeds from the sale of Last Dance at the Savoy benefit Cure PSP research and caregiving support. Some of the research that they are doing is now informing how they are researching Alzheimer's disease. It's been very effective. And one of the things that Jeff did was to volunteer for clinical drug trials. He also, in the end, donated his brain and body to Cure PSP research, because it's really only with brain donation that they can ultimately diagnose that is what the disease is. And they learn such a lot from that. From having the brain.
I can definitely imagine, and that was very generous of your husband to donate.
I am such a proponent of organ donation. I have a kid brother who had juvenile diabetes, and he's alive today because of an organ donor. Oh. And I think he's the longest survivor now of a kidney pancreas transplant. So I am absolutely a proponent of organ donation. I'm an organ donor, and it was one of the things that Jeff really volunteered early on to do. He really wanted to be what he called a guinea pig, and so I totally supported his decision to do so.
Absolutely. And what is the progress in the research that they're doing? Are they getting close to a cure, or do they feel that they still have quite a bit more down the road?
I think a cure is still a ways off. However, by identifying, this tau protein buildup, which is what's considered, fundamental to these diseases, I think that they're making giant strides. They really have learned such a lot just in the last couple of years. And since I don't have any sort of a medical background, I had Dr. Yvette Bortel on write the foreword to the book, in which she discusses a lot of the treatments that are available, and really discusses the research in a way that I can't. However, as a caregiver, I learned such a lot that I really did want to pass along, because when Jeff was first diagnosed, there wasn't a book like this. Mm-hmm. And I really did search the internet to try to find personal experiences from other people who were dealing with this day-to-day challenge. Mm-hmm. So I hope that's what my book is. And the resource guide at the end contains so much information about support groups and links to all sorts of assistance, like handicap equipment and speech therapists, occupational therapists, all of that sort of thing. Because it's so important. I didn't realize when I was caring for Jeff just how important just physical therapy is.
Absolutely. And that was actually my very next question. What was it like being a caretaker? There might be many listeners who are about to embark on that journey of being a caretaker, or they've just begun being someone's caretaker. What was that like for you?
Well, initially it was very difficult, because I had absolutely no idea what this disease was. So I went to a support group, and that's where I started learning about the disease and how to best take care of my husband. And it really was daunting, because to see people in a far more advanced progression of the disease is really disheartening. You see what the end game is. And yet, the really important thing is the quality of life and making the most of, every precious minute. So among the many things that we did do was to install handicap equipment, mm-hmm. and really, because choking is a real worry, and aspirational pneumonia and so on, just learning about nutrition and all of these other things that you really need to be concerned about and deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Of course, very much so. how did you balance that with your needs? Because you have to take care of yourself, you have to take care of your immune system, your physical body, but also your mental and emotional state needs nurturing as well. Were you able to balance that?
I think that I was, but you're bringing up a very interesting point, because all of these neurological diseases have this one thing in common. They're very isolating, because as the disease progresses, you are required to do that much more as a caregiver. Mm-hmm. And certainly the person that you're caring for just has less ability. There's also a terrific role reversal. In my case, the big strong guy who looked after me needed looking after. And that role reversal is difficult to deal with. But I think that we really did strike a balance. And of course, I think the takeaway from the book is the importance of being patient, realizing that the person that you're taking care of really can't help spilling things, dropping things,
right.
Really can't help it. And every day there seems to be a new normal. One more thing that, that is, that somebody can't do. And it's very disheartening, but it is part of the disease, and it's something that you have to learn to deal with.
Did you learn to take time for yourself, to take breaks? Did you bring someone in to assist you so that you could maintain as much of a balance as possible when you're caring for someone with such a degree of illness?
Well, yes. I was actually Jeff's sole caregiver right up until maybe 6 months before he passed away. And I did get overtired. And when you're dealing with somebody 24 hours a day, and they lose so much of their ability to care for themselves, I mean, you really are doing everything, the bathing and feeding and everything. But in the last 6 months, I finally learned about home hospice care. And there are so many people that are, think that it really is end-of-life care, that you bring somebody, you go into hospice care in the last week or maybe 3 or 4 days.
Right.
In fact, home hospice care is really quality of life care. And when it's done in the home, you have a nurse and you have bathing assistants, you have a doctor that comes. And in fact, the care is so good that very often people go off hospice care because they improve to such a degree.
Wow.
And that did happen with my husband. But he was in home hospice care for altogether maybe 9 months. I mean, we went into it, then we went out, and you have that choice. But it's one thing that I really do talk about in the book, because I think it's so important that people realize that there is that option, and to take advantage of it.
That is wonderful to know that he was able to improve to such a degree that hospice care could leave, and then it sounds like they needed to come back to assist with the end of life.
It's palliative care, but of course Jeff was eligible because he was at end of life. I mean, it is a terminal disease. There is no cure. There is no real treatment protocol for it. The reason why I was able to write the book is that one of Jeff's early doctors suggested that I keep a daily journal. And the reason he suggested it is that because there's no treatment, they very often prescribe all kinds of medications off-label. So Jeff was taking things for restless leg syndrome and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, things that he didn't have, just on the chance that there was some ingredient in one of those medications that would help him. So he suggested that I keep a daily record so I could see what the progression was and what might be of help. So when it came time to write the book, about 1.5 years after Jeff passed away, I had that template on my desktop, and I was able to refer to that in the writing. So in a way, I really am offering somebody else what I did not have when my own husband was diagnosed.
Oh, that is so wonderful. And an excellent advice from the doctor. I've always also advised people, keep a journal, keep a record, a documentation of what you're going through, whether it's a physical illness or whether it's mental, emotional, spiritual, but something you can document so you can look at patterns, you can look and see what's working, what's not working. So in your case, it sounds like not only were you able to track certain medications, you were able to document probably how you were feeling, what you were experiencing, what you were witnessing, observing in your husband.
Right. And, you mentioned before, how did we cope? And I mentioned it being an isolating disease. One of the things that I really did do in the last year of Jeff's life, when he was starting to lose his ability to speak, I bought him what he called his Madonna, but it was that headband with the sponge mic, the voice amplifier, which absolutely changed his outlook. And I also sort of turned the bedroom, and it's a fairly large bedroom, but I took out all of the medications, all of the handicap equipment. I turned it into what amounted to like a cocktail lounge. I actually put in a round table with 2 chairs, and people knew that between 5 and 7 every afternoon, we had happy hour. And people could just drop in and have coffee, tea, a beer, a glass of wine, whatever. But Jeff looked forward to that because he needed that socializing. And it was really one of the best things that we did. And it was just small groups of people, 1 or 2 at a time. And, if they sat close enough and it was convivial, they could understand what Jeff was saying. So that was terribly important. And it also gave me a break, and it gave me an outlet.
Mm-hmm. That is a fantastic idea.
Oh,
fantastic idea. Well, hopefully you continued your happy hour afterwards, and you continue to enjoy yourself from 5 to 7 every day.
Right.
And now some people might say, okay, well, you are an actress, you have published many works, so they might assume you have money, you have the resources to care for your husband, to change things in your home to accommodate his physical needs. What advice might you offer to folks who do not have the same type of resources?
Oh, you're bringing up a very, very good point. In fact, there are 2 points there. The thing that I really do have in common with other women, and especially, and certainly men who are caregivers, is that I do have a profession. And I did have to kick back. I was not able to go out and audition and work in the way that I had before. Mm-hmm. So that is one of those things that somebody has to face. One of the things that I did in the resource guide was to give links to all sorts of social services and Medicare and all sorts of other links that might be able to provide somebody with financial assistance or home assistance of some sort. It's a very good point that you're bringing up, because I really do think that there are a lot of assistance programs out there that people are not familiar with. And caregiving is hugely expensive, not only because you have to pull back on what you're able to do, professionally, as in my case, but because everything involved with it is expensive, the handicap equipment, everything. So, yeah, that's why I put that in the resource guide.
Excellent. And that is very true. There are a lot of resources for people to seek out, and it's not about comparing, well, this person has money, they were able to, and kind of get into that feeling sorry mode, but really seeking out the resources that are available. So that's excellent. That's in your book.
Home hospice care is one of the best examples of that. People are just not aware that that's available to them. And it made all the difference in the world for us.
Excellent. Well, they're aware of it now.
Right. Good.
If not before, when they read your book. Now, during your husband's illness, your mom died. So,
yes.
So you have this, this double issue going on, this double grieving. How did you cope with that?
Interestingly enough, my mother was 93, and she had lymphoma, and she chose not to do anything but palliative care. And I really did respect her wish, because she felt that going on chemo or anything else would have given her only a few extra months, and it wasn't worth it. So I took care of her the last several months, weeks of her life. And she lived in Minneapolis. and Jeff was here in Los Angeles. And even though he spent a bit of time with me, I spent most of my time there. So when I did come back to Los Angeles, I saw the huge difference in how my husband was able to care for himself. And it was another wake-up call that we were dealing with, something that we really needed to talk to a doctor about. That's when we started going to a neurologist. Friends would call me up and say, we took Jeff out for dinner, but he had trouble getting his jacket on. He had trouble getting into the car. He seemed a little befuddled. And suddenly, when all of that started adding up, I realized that we needed to look into what was causing it. Interestingly enough, when you're living with somebody on a day-to-day basis, you don't realize how much you're picking up the slack. I think that if it hadn't been for caring for my mother for those several weeks, it would have taken me longer to realize that there was something wrong with Jeff.
Absolutely, because when you're away for a period of time, you have that break and you come back and you start noticing things you hadn't noticed before. So that makes a lot of sense.
Why would it not occur to me that Jeff was not able to open up mail? He couldn't use two hands at the same time. I came back and I found the cupboard door on the left side open throughout the kitchen because he couldn't coordinate his hands. Mm-hmm. There were so many things that I noticed that, of course, if I had been there every day, I would have closed the cupboard. I would have, been opening the mail. I would have been doing all of those things. So it was a real eye-opener.
So is that what you suggest for people to be more proactive? Notice these little things that are beginning to occur, such as the cabinets are being left open, the mail is not being opened, difficulty in getting a coat on.
Absolutely. It starts adding up after a while. And it's so easy because these things, usually start showing themselves in the 60s, when you're in your 60s. Which means that it's so easy to say, oh, well, I'm just getting older. So, and it's so easy to say, well, I tripped because on the sidewalk, the surface was slippery, the chair was wobbly. You come up with all of these excuses, but at a certain point, you have to stop and say, this isn't quite right. We have to look into this.
Okay, so what are you up to now? Acting, writing?
I'm doing both. I'm back writing. I've just finished writing September Girl, which is a standalone women's fiction. It's with my agent. And we've got our 50th anniversary Dark Shadows Festival coming up. Dark Shadows was my very first professional job. So I'm going to get with all of the actors I worked with 50 years ago, and which really should be fun. And Dark Shadows Return to Cullenwood is a book I wrote about the 5 decades of Dark Shadows. And I'm also acting again. I'm actually doing a little episode tomorrow, something. And I had a recurring role as Miriam with George Siegel and the Goldbergs. Mm-hmm. And I did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is really fun. I mean, it was fun.
Excellent. Well, what last advice can you offer the listeners here today about caring for someone who has an ailment, but also taking care of yourself?
Well, people are always warned as a caregiver to really look after your own physical and emotional health. And one, get a fatigue. So my takeaway from the book is really to have patience. And I'm not necessarily a patient person, but it is the thing that I really had to learn. And I also learned that when a friend said, why don't you go out for an hour or two? Let me just sit with Jeff. To learn to say, thank you so much. That would be wonderful, because you do need that opportunity to just get out, walk fast, even if it's going to the grocery store. And just getting out in a different environment, it's so important to one's own physical and mental health.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kathryn, so much for being a guest on my show this week.
And I also should add that a portion of the proceeds from the sale of Last Dance at the Savoy benefits Cure PSP research. And also the book is available in audio, print, and ebook on Amazon. And I hope everybody will go and at least download a sample.
Excellent. And also, what is your website?
My website is www.kathrynleightscott.com.
Wonderful. And I want to thank the listeners here as well for joining me on Journey for Truth on iHeartRadio and YouTube. Until next time, have a fantastic week. Okay.